Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about Israel's natural gas situation and the tremendous find of natural gas. What impact do you think it's going to have on the overall geopolitical situation with Israel?
I just recently spoke in a panel where that was the question that was asked. It's the great discovery of gas in the Mediterranean, something that's going to increase the tensions, or could it be really an impetus for peace and for bringing countries together? And sort of in the Israeli experience, at least, recent years, we've sort of seen the latter, that we've seen the gas sort of be something that allows us to sort of move aside from traditional conflict-related issues and sort of move into more positive areas. For example, I was part of the legal team where we wrote a delimitation agreement to define our maritime borders with Cyprus, the country that sits across from us. And we were a little bit late in the game, actually. Egypt had already signed an agreement which went into force in 2004. Lebanon had signed a similar agreement in 2007. And in 2010, we were finally able to sign an agreement which entered into force in February 2011. So now we're actually in the next stage, in stage 2, which is entering into what's called a framework unitization agreement. Unitization from the word unit, that there's a developing international practice where if you have a transboundary reservoir, ideally to maximize both profits, to maximize from a technological point of view, the best way to do it is that both countries come together and then the private licensees will develop together. So I would like to hope that definitely the discovery of gas will lead to a positive direction for not just between Israel and Cyprus, but between all the players in the region.
So let's focus on the Cyprus issue.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe what the main legal issues are regarding the Israeli Cypriot gas? Are there any issues regarding the border of the two countries' economic zones?
So in our case with Cyprus, we're in a good situation because, like I said, in 2011, our agreement on delimitation of what's called our exclusive economic zone, which is the maritime zones that are usually under international law up to 200 nautical miles. But in the case of Israel and Cyprus, we actually have less than 200 nautical miles between the two countries. We're talking about something like 180 nautical miles, roughly, depending on where you measure. So we had to enter, because of the overlapping areas, we had to enter into a delimitation agreement. Now, in that situation, we already know where Cyprus is and where Israel is, and that makes things a lot easier. So now the next question is, what happens when you have a reservoir that sort of sits on both sides of that line? And like I said, unitization is the usual way that countries will handle that. So we're in a good place with Cyprus in terms of knowing exactly where they are and we are. Now, if you have reservoirs, and there on the Israeli side, we've discovered quite a few reservoirs. There are some very significant finds like the Tamar field and the Leviathan field, which are entirely in Israel's maritime areas. And once you have a defined line, and those we know now for sure that those areas are nowhere near the Cypriot border, then we can go ahead and develop them independently. When we're talking about areas that are on both sides, then we have to work with our neighbors. Now, we know that there's definitely one transboundary reservoir, the Aphrodite field. On Israel's side, it's the Ishai license. Sometimes it's called Block 12. We know of one, and that is estimated to be around 70 CF in terms of its potential. The Cypriots have already started exploratory drilling, and Israel is to begin, it was just reported in the paper in about another month or so, exploratory drilling on its end. We're also moving along to sort of finalize the framework unitization agreement. Now that agreement, it's sort of a two-layered agreement, that you have the framework agreement between the governments, which set forth on the macro level the rules that the licensees sort of have to play by in order to develop the field. And then the licensees will have to abide by those rules and develop together, hopefully, the transboundary reservoir, which will be to the benefit of both sides.
Do you expect Israel and Cyprus to collaborate in developing infrastructure for the export of natural gas?
These are issues that are definitely on the table. There's a number of issues in gas-related issues that are on the table, including possibility of Cypriot purchase of Israeli gas as well. Cyprus is in a sort of, there's a number of issues sort of that are before the Cypriots beyond the political issues on the island with, the Turkish, the situation with the north and then the occupation there. But there are a number of issues, including that Cyprus finds itself right now in an energy crisis. They had a major explosion in one of their power plants about a year ago last summer. And so they're really looking for different options, and the whole option of cooperation with Israel is quite appealing. They also, with the greater picture of what's going on in Europe and what's going on in Greece, it's sort of, there's always the fear that could sort of bubble over, but particularly because of the linkage between Cypriots and Greek banks, that could bubble over into Cyprus. So there's a real, desire to sort of work forward positively and address these issues before something negative happens. And I think that's a positive in terms of the interdynamics for how sort of allowing for cooperation, paving the way for cooperation between the actors. That may be something that, issues that are less positive can in the end sort of lead to a more positive situation between us.
So under the agreement, if Cyprus and Israel do collaborate on infrastructure, do you think this is likely to take the form of a pipeline being developed for Europe, or do you think it might be a liquefied natural gas plant being set up somewhere in Cyprus? And if so, where might that be located?
Nothing's been decided for sure, and there are a number of options, and you've mentioned two of them. One is the option of the pipeline. One is the option of plant to liquefy in Cyprus. Another option is maybe floating liquefied, to do that in the water, of liquefying gas in the water. And a lot of that just has to do with, what are the markets that are available and the needs. And also, you can't ignore the sort of greater political situation. Laying down a pipeline under international maritime law, on the high seas, all states have a right to lay pipelines, and also in states' different exclusive economic zones, meaning the areas beyond the territorial waters, you also have a right to lay pipelines, even if it's not your own exclusive economic zone. The one thing is that also under international law, the coastal state, if it's in their exclusive economic zone, could object to the path of the pipeline, and this could lead to possible objections, given particularly Turkey's ways in there. And Turkey has a very different sort of non-traditional approach to delineation issues in the Mediterranean.
What's your view of Turkey? I mean, does Israel feel that it should involve itself in dealing with Turkey or the Cyprus issue, or does Israel take the view that this is primarily something that the Turkish and the Cypriot government should resolve among themselves?
I mean, certainly, politics is a side of economics, and this has always been something, even in better times, that we've made clear to the Turkish government, that Israel wants to advance its vital economic interests in the region, and I think the same would go for Turkey. Overall, we would like to see, ideally, it would be best if all the different actors in the region were on board. I mean, that would include our neighbors to the south, it would include our neighbors to the north. And, we could maximize this great find in the Mediterranean if everyone sort of worked together. And we're not going to weigh in on Cypriot domestic issues, just like we wouldn't want them to weigh in on our own issues. I think those are two separate things.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Let's look now at Lebanon. I mean, what's the status of the economic zone boundary between Israel and Lebanon?
So, first of all, like I said at the beginning, Cyprus and Lebanon actually signed an agreement in 2007 to delineate their overlapping exclusive economic zones in the Mediterranean. Like Israel, there are not those. If you had 400 nautical miles, then everyone would get their own 200 nautical mile zone, but we have a very extreme overlap. Cyprus has already ratified that agreement. In order for an agreement usually to go into full force, both sides need to ratify it. And with Egypt and with Israel, our agreements have been fully ratified on both sides and deposited in the UN in full force. In the Lebanese case, although they signed it in 2007, which from a legal point of view, once you already sign an agreement, an international treaty, you're bound by the terms of that treaty, Lebanon has not ratified that agreement. Cyprus has. So now you have a situation where they have a delimitation, but they're still waiting for the Lebanese delimitation. Now, interestingly, perhaps curiously, in 2010, Lebanon went ahead with a couple of unilateral moves at the UN. Now, generally speaking, if you look at the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which is sort of the Bible of peacetime maritime law and sets out all the rules of how to delineate the different maritime zones, the relevant provisions call for states to work together and try to reach an agreement. That would be ideal. Or if they can't reach an agreement, at least try to reach provisional arrangements. But certainly if there's some sort of disputed maritime claims, to talk to one another. Now, in the case of Lebanon, Lebanon doesn't recognize Israel. And so instead of sort of turning to Israel and discussing maritime issues, it went ahead to the UN in 2010 and deposited a series of unilateral positions. The first unilateral position set what Lebanon sees as its delimitation with Israel, sort of between Israel and Lebanon, the line that runs east-west between it from the Lebanese perspective. I won't call it a border because under international law, a border is something that is agreed by both states. It then went ahead and did a second unilateral position, which is that it took the line that it agreed with Cyprus in 2007 and amended it, and I say amended in quotations because to amend it you usually need both sides, and under the terms of their agreement you would need both sides to amend. But you pulled the line further south, entering into what Israel believes is its exclusive economic zone, also entering into the area that actually Cyprus and Israel divided with another. So you have a situation of overlapping maritime claims. Now, under international law, usually when you're getting to the point of trying to delimit the maritime zone, you usually start out with the mathematical approach of trying to find out what the median line is. Now, clearly this is not one single number. It's a complicated process where you pick points on the coast, and there are definitely ways accepted practice in cartography under law of how you pick those points on the coast. But you pick points and you try to reach a median line. That said, if you were to go to international court, if you were to go to arbitration, the judge or the mediator might look at some other special circumstances to see if anything else should weigh in when delineating the maritime border. Now, these special circumstances can be a number of things. There's no closed list. It could be, was there a historic agreement between the parties in the maritime arena? It could be something like, is there a very odd geographic situation that you might have all sorts of rock formations, and how does that weigh in? Does the mathematical approach perhaps create total disproportionality in terms of who's getting what? Again, a number of things. Now, one of the things we've seen in case law that also weighs in was, when the question of, particularly in gas practice and oil practice, would that influence the maritime delineation? And we actually have case law that says, no, that wouldn't influence the situation unless there was either explicit or tacit acquiescence. Now, in the case of Lebanon, in their unilateral positions from 2010, we see those positions as being problematic. Israel, we see those positions being problematic from both a legal and cartographic point of view in terms of how we see the proper way of delineating the maritime, what should be the border between Israel and Lebanon. And so in order to prevent tacit acquiescence, so that if we would ever get to a case where we were trying to resolve our situation, we felt it was important in July 2011 to submit pursuant to a government decision, our version of what we think the maritime delimitation should be between Israel and Lebanon. And this created a sort of a triangle of a disputed area. Let's say that Israel, this is not unique, and this actually doesn't have to do with the politics of the Middle East. There are loads of areas throughout the world where there are ongoing and sometimes quite controversial maritime disputes. And if you take a look you're an economic journalist, so I'm sure you know about all the disputes going on between China and Japan, the South China Sea area, Korea is in there too. There's a lot of many maritime disputes. If you go into the website of the International Court of Justice, you see just how many maritime border disputes they've been involved in. You go in the Permanent Court of Arbitration; they've been involved in a number. There's a chamber that was set up under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. They just had their first ruling between Myanmar and Bangladesh. This is not something unique. That said, what is somewhat unusual is that you're talking about, particularly if you look at Lebanese submissions, it's difficult for them to even say the word Israel. They usually will not even say Israel by name. And so the question is how we're going to get to a resolution in this area. In Israel's submission to the UN in 2011, where we gave our own version of where we see the maritime border with Lebanon, we did emphasize, however, in our letter to the Secretary General that we are interested in resolving this dispute with and resolving all these issues with our neighbors. And this is something that's very important. We really took the language of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, and we tried to mirror the language about trying to be positive and open to dialogue. That is if the dialogue is a professional dialogue that is based on legal principles and accepted cartographic practice and tries to stay away from politics. There are ways to solve these problems in a purely technical kind of way. And we would hope, I think, again, getting back to your original question, that would really lead us to a win-win situation. I mean, there's a lot to be gained on the Lebanese side. There's a lot to be gained on the Israeli side. And we saw this in our experience with Cyprus, so long as you have ambiguity, even about just a meter of where the border is supposed to be, investors won't come. Investors will come when they know that they can get, definite coordinates of where each side is. And I think that the Lebanese government knows that as well.
Let's turn on to Egypt. Okay. Is the Israeli government getting involved in the dispute between ENG and the government of Egypt? Or is the official attitude that this is a commercial dispute?
I would say on that issue, the latter, that particular issue is a private commercial matter. It's being handled in private channels. It's a classic, contracts issue of, material breach of contract, and it's being handled in the way that any sort of breach of contract would be handled.
And does the Israeli government regard the discontinuation of natural gas supplies from Egypt as a diplomatic issue and a test of the new Egyptian government's attitude towards the Egypt-Israel peace treaty and Egypt's commitment to it?
I think that's going a bit far. Again, I think that this is a commercial issue, and it's being handled between commercial actors there. I think to tie it in with the peace treaty is a little bit sort of mixing apples and oranges.
It's a stretch.
It's a stretch. I mean, for us, it is very important, and luckily, thus far, the Egyptian government has also said, emphasized the importance of maintaining the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. This has been something that's been a wonderful thing, and we hope to maintain that. And so, who knows? Maybe we'll have the opportunity for cooperation on our side. In the maritime arena, maybe we've been surprised. They always said, in biblical literature that we live in the land of milk and honey. Right. And we're always asking, where's the milk? Where's the honey? And here we've discovered all of a sudden, everyone's kind of shocked by that. And so, again, talked about the northern front, maybe also on the southern front, this could be something that could be positive.
Well, turning now to the Palestinian Authority, what's Israel's policy towards the gas fields found in or near the area of the economic zone of the Palestinian Authority? There's the Mediterranean coast of the Gaza Strip.
Mm-hmm. Well, and first of all, there's some ambiguity in terms of the legal status of the maritime areas off the coast of Gaza right now, because so far Hamas controls the Gaza Strip.
It's Hamas that controls it, not the Palestinian Authority.
Right. Now, in the late 90s, actually, rights were granted to British company, British Gas, in gas fields off the coast of the Gaza Strip. Actually, from an Israeli point of view, we would like to see the development of those gas fields, so long as the proceeds don't fall into Hamas hands. We don't have any objections to those rights being exercised. And then, as you move further north, then there are fields that are being developed on the Israeli side that are on our south border, but not across from the Gaza Strip. There are other issues that are involved in terms of maritime areas of the Gaza Strip, but that more has to do with not peacetime law, peacetime maritime law, but rather laws of armed conflict and the security situation. And unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen the maritime arena, which is really used for some 90+% of all transportation trade in the world, at some point goes through the sea. And we've seen, otherwise innocent commercial shipping being taken advantage of to smuggle in weapons into our areas, into terrorist groups that are out for the destruction of Israel. And we saw about a year ago one ship, Victoria, with 50 tons of weapons being smuggled on it. If you would have looked at the crates, I saw the crates. You had things like lentils and cotton on the crates, and the crew had no idea, but various actors figured out a way to smuggle in quite advanced land to sea weaponry. And you have other situations. We had one boat that was caught with 500 tons of weaponry. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, 500 tons of weaponry, that's the entire amount of weapons that were used in the Second Lebanon War against Israel. So in that area, we have a sort of sensitive security situation, but that's aside from peacetime issues. Now, certainly if we are able to sit down, negotiate, and move towards peace, one of the core issues that needs to be resolved between Israel and Palestinians is borders. And when we're talking about borders, we're not just talking about land borders, we're talking about sea borders as well.
So do you see any prospect of cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, or even Hamas, in developing these fields?
Again, in terms of there's a potential there. Hamas is not. It's a terrorist entity. It's just like under U.S. law and under EU law in Israel. It's an organization that does not recognize Israel, is still committed to a violent approach, does not accept any of the existing agreements. So in terms of, at least in the current configuration, unless Hamas would suddenly change their charter, their political platform, that's not really a reality. In terms of cooperation with the Palestinians or with other different countries that are being given rights, again, we have to see what will happen sort of on the political side in terms of potential for cooperation. But I think that overall, Israel would be open to the possibility for cooperation with moderate Palestinian actors.
Great. Just a couple of more questions. Russian President Putin visited Israel, I think, in June this year. Was this largely or in part focused on the potential Russian involvement in the development of the Israeli gas fields?
I don't know what the content of the talks were. I know that there's a number of actors in the area that are looking into, we discovered large amounts of gas and sort of the potential for investment in the area. But there's nothing sort of there that was set in stone.
There's been a certain amount of speculation, as you know, that Gazprom might be one of the leading players among the foreign energy companies to help Israel develop the natural gas fields. Is that likely, or?
I can't really say in terms of the weigh in on the likelihood. There are a number of actors that are certainly interested. Thus far, the major actor in the maritime arena in Israel has been actually a U.S. company, Noble Energy, that has both interests, both on the Israel side and on the Cypriot side, as well. Actually, the agreement that I'm negotiating right now with the unitization, actually, we see Noble on the other side. We have different companies, including a sort of a group of different countries, including one has a Norwegian interest and stuff. And so we've seen different countries, a number of countries, not only Russia, expressing interest in sort of looking into what exactly are there opportunities for them. I can't really say what will be in the future. One of the other things we're working on the domestic side is also sort of developing our own policies and how we see our import and export policies. This whole area, and I can say this on the legal side for sure, it was something that we didn't know that the potential was out there, and so, we're still playing a bit of catch-up in terms of getting everything in order, including both of our domestic policies and our legislation, just because this came as a bit of a surprise in terms of the potential that was out there. But there are a number of possibilities, a number of actors that might play a larger or smaller role in our area as we move along.